Hello and welcome to Studio Sundays. I'm hyped that I'm now doing this in video form. I have been loving the interviews and having a blast doing it. And what I realized was since I was sending these interviews via the newsletter and just cleaning them up and only sending out the written version of them, the real gold is in the conversation that I'm having with these really interesting creatives and people. And so I decided that after getting some of your requests, we need to just do this in audio form. And since I already have those video recordings, why not just do it over video? Without further ado, I'm very excited for this week's spotlight, Laura Burkhart. Laura is a fine artist and a painter and also does this really interesting woodworking. She's got a beautiful style. We talk about her lifelong dedication to being an artist, how to stay vulnerable and how she's stayed vulnerable on social media, how she maintains that work-life balance with burnout, and also how she works with designers to get her art photographed in beautiful spaces. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoy it too. And without further ado, let's dive into it. So nice to meet you. I feel like I've been following you for, I don't even know how it's just one of those Instagram things where I just found you years ago and like started following your
Yeah,
work and I love what you do.
same. Thank you. Same. Yeah, I feel like I don't know, maybe we both kind of started around the same time, or Instagram was a very different like situation
Right.
back then. But yeah, I feel like you're one of like the original artists that I kind of like also knew in this space and followed along, and it's been fun to see like all the things that you do. And I actually don't know how we've never met before.
I know. Because where are you based right now?
Well, I'm like a little bit north of Seattle in Lake Forest Park. I mean,
Cool.
just in the suburbs, but where are you?
I'm in Port Angeles on the Olympic Peninsula. We're going to dive into your background story and your origin story with art. But to start out, why don't you just give a brief introduction of who you are today?
Well, I'm Laura Burkhart, and I'm an artist living just like I said, north of Seattle. And I've dabbled in tons of mediums over the years, but these days my really bread and butter is landscape painting and woodwork, like woodwork sculptural wall art. And I'm a mother of two. I have an almost 2-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. And that takes up quite a bit of my time, but I work out of my backyard studio, which is where we are now. And yeah, just sort of do everything from launching collections to working with clients one-on-one on custom pieces, for both residential and commercial, and like everything from murals to, like front doors, stuff like that. So
Yeah, I feel like you've got a really wide range of skills in what you're able to do. I mean, like to have the wood elements, and some art that's just purely focused on like woodworking, and then some art that combines the paintings and the wood, and then some
yeah.
just paint. Like it's a really cool, like you've got quite the skill set.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like to some people it can feel like very different mediums, and some people I think get confused that I do both things. But I feel like most artists like dabble in a lot of different mediums. You maybe get like known for one, but most of us have tried all the creative outlets at one point, right?
So when did you start kind of being creative, and what was your origin story with being an artist? I know a lot of us as artists have like started as kids, but sometimes it's not something you realize till later in life. So how did you find that?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely like the started as the kid, never put it down story. Like I can, like, as long as I can remember age 5, it was like I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. Definitely lots of iterations throughout the time of whether that was actually possible. I think I really grew up in an era where it was not like it was, there were very few role models there that were doing that. It was sort of one of my understanding was sort of like, that's great and you're good at it, but like it doesn't really happen for people to actually make it a career, right? It was like, figure something else out for your career though. And very much that era and generation of like, you go to college, you get a degree in something very marketable, and then you get a job with a 401k, and that's how you do it. And then you can like do your art on the side. So I was always super passionate about like any chance I got, always taking art classes, always entering art competitions, everything in my community. It was just like always a huge part of my life. And then I went to UW, and I think the first year or two, which is University of Washington, if people are not local to here, but um, tried on a couple other majors, tried to get like the more, what I think was seen as like the marketable major skill. Like, what am I going to do for a career? And just really ended up going all in on art and said, like, this is what I really want to do. I cannot imagine myself doing anything else. I know that I'm gonna have to work really hard and to make it happen, but I'm willing to do that. So I, went the art route, became an art major, and have every job I've ever had has been a creative job in some aspect, whether it was working for other designers or companies as a creative. I've sort of, even in college, like my friends were, maybe working at restaurants and stuff. And I was like at a pottery painting studio doing custom paintings and teaching art classes and stuff like that. So it's just, I've sort of never strayed from the artist career. I always kind of had my eye on that. It's had a lot of different iterations throughout the years, but it's always been the path, always been the goal, all I've ever wanted to do. So
That's amazing. I love that. I love, like, it's special in life to have that type of clarity too, because I think there are a
totally.
lot of people that don't have that clarity on like that one thing that just really makes them feel alive. So I don't know, I always feel grateful for that in myself too, of just being like, I'm really glad that I know that this is like what I like to do. And it's
Yes, I
you've
think
really
that's
that
such a true point, and I come back to that all the time. Like, I know that it's a gift in itself just to, like you said, to have the clarity to even know what you want to do with your life. And I come back to that all the time when I'm struggling or things are like not going as well. I'm like, there are a lot of other things I could have done. And at any point, I know I would have been trying to come back to this. And this really feels like my heart and soul's like purpose. So that kind of keeps me working really hard at it, making it happen. And yeah, I just feel grateful for that, to have been like had that clarity for so long.
for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. So before you became like a full-time artist back in 2017, 2018 time, you worked a couple corporate jobs. It sounds like they were also focused on design and art aspects, but what was it like making that transition from like the corporate world into working for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, and I have to say, 2017 wasn't the first time. I did it earlier than that and sort of, I wouldn't say failed, but it didn't go that well. And I sort of freaked out, and I ended up like getting another job and going back into like the working for someone else as a creative and an artist. But I think I wasn't fully prepared that first time. So yeah, I mean, I'm at this point 20 years of out of college. I'm so like I'm almost 40, and so it's been about 20 years of being in the creative and design field and working for other people, and then always doing my own thing on the side. And I'd say for quite a few years I was like very seriously doing my own thing on the side of a very creative, and sort of like I had a couple roles that were very much like dream job scenarios for an artist, for a creative, for great companies and brands. But it still always felt like I was craving doing my own thing. So it was hard for me to leave, because I think from the outside people were really like, you're doing the thing, you're getting paid to be creative, to do these artistic things, like, and it was much more comfortable. I had a little bit of 401k, I had the benefits, all that stuff that you and I do not have as, creative entrepreneurs. But I just really like knew that I wanted to be living a different lifestyle and doing it on my own. So the first time, like I said, I left from one job, didn't quite know all the like the taxes, the actual realities of living and doing it. And I just ended up finding a really great opportunity and going back into the work field. So I like to say that just because I'm like, it might take a couple little bit of time to take, but that second time, I really seriously, I would say I was working a more than full-time job. And then this was before I had kids. And then every single moment I had outside of that job, I was really working my butt off on putting all my creative stuff out there, but also like really saving every dollar I made, really tracking and understanding my costs and in a very different way. And I like to say it's sort of like that time I really diligently like felt like I built the net so that when I left, it wasn't just like leap and the net will appear. It was like, okay, leap. And I know that I've really like built a foundation for myself. Like I had clients at that point. I had been selling work at that point. I had things lined up before I left. And I knew having like gone back and forth, I knew that like being on my own was really just, the lifestyle, and I needed to like make that work. So it was a little bit scary, but that time in like end of 2017, I was super prepared, maybe to the point of like I could have left sooner, but I was so overthinking it at that point, so scared, and I finally just had to like, I kind of had to have like a wake up call. I actually had like a pretty traumatic miscarriage, and that is what ultimately pushed me into like leaving. I'm trying not to be as much this way, but I'm one of those people that the universe has to really be like, it's time, like shake me into doing
Yeah.
like the next step. And that was one of those things. It was like I was sort of, okay, well, we want to have a family. And I had this idea in my head I needed to be, very much like society says, like in this corporate role, I had to have the security of a company if I wanted to have a family. So even though I knew so much in my heart I wanted to be on my own as an artist, that felt like really scary. So when I miscarried, I kind of was in effort mode and, kind of like new lease on life, everything shifts into perspective. I think when you have any kind of loss, and I was just like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go for it. And I kind of left everything behind, but I had been preparing for so long. I think it was just like that last, like the actual leap took me a lot of overthinking, a lot of self-doubt, but I finally just did it. I
Wow.
never looked back since that one, honestly.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of gold in what you just said. And like, I relate to that so much too, in a way. I was definitely not prepared at all when I became a full-time artist because I was straight out of college and had little life experience, even ever having a real job. But I think for like creative entrepreneurs, people that want to be entrepreneurs, I always recommend having that security and having some sort of plan to a certain point, but you can only plan to a certain point, right? Because like you could try and then like, yeah, you have to go back and get a job. But I do also feel like there's a thing about listening to the universe signs. And if you're one of those stubborn people, which it sounds like you
Yeah.
might have that. And I definitely had that in my own way. It took me breaking my back to
Yeah, I remember
find the
seeing that.
passion of
Yeah.
art. Because I like was going to school for something that was depressing me. And like, if I like, then I just like that injury helped me find art. So I do think sometimes these really hard things that happen in life definitely happen for a reason. And I've found that with many people I've talked to. So it makes sense, like why you finally decided to do it. And that's like the silver lining of going through a really hard thing.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree.
So thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so now you're a full-time artist. You're also a mother. And I love how you like share parts of your life on Instagram and the internet too, of like, it's like the reality of like, I think that's what everybody wants to see is also the artist behind the art. And that's what makes our art more powerful is the storytelling. And so I love how you add your kids into like your storytelling or like how your daughter's doing art on your desk while you're
Yeah.
creating. How does that balance go for you in terms of, I mean, we all struggle with work-life balance, especially as creative entrepreneurs and hard workers. So how do you find that? And do you allow yourself more time in your life now to like have free time?
Yeah, I think that was a hard one for me for sure. And it is tricky to balance. And I think of course now having kids, it's like a whole other ball game too, but it also um sort of forces me to have more work life balance, like, but I would say the first few years of that, like going full time by myself, I just had it so in my head that like this was going to be hard. I was always going to have to work so much harder, so much more than I would ever get paid for. I just was like, it was like this acceptance of like, I just need to make a livelihood. I'll work my butt off and it'll just like, I just kind of like always accepted that I would be burning myself out, running myself into the ground, and it would be worth it because I'd be doing what I loved, you know? And I think I had to like rewire that in my brain to some extent because I burned out like a lot, and I would have like these days in my studio where I would just be like, I'd have the time to work, the space, and I would just like, I was hitting a wall. I couldn't do anything, and I was trying to like dig myself in even more and just be like, sort of make myself do it. And as I'm sure you know, it's like that is just not how making art works, like almost ever. Like it's very hard to just force it out of you. And I think that's the times that I've done that, I've made the worst like stuff to be honest, like I've made myself like create and just like bust stuff out because I just felt like I needed to. And I was at such burnout. And I'm like, and those were not my best, like the time that I was doing the most and sort of head down working the most are not when I had the most productivity really, and the best creations. So I think I had to really like learn that it's okay to step away. Not just it's okay to step away, but it's actually like really vital to my process these days, especially like I know that if I'm not giving myself time and space to rest and recalibrate, but also like be inspired, be out in nature, do the things that are actually inspiring my work, like the work suffers. It doesn't actually help to just stay in the studio and try to make work all the time, but never go see the mountains that I'm painting, or anything like that. And the same goes like with the kids, my kids inspire me so much. I love hanging out with them, and becoming a mother has been like this whole like new level of self and of me being an artist. It's really opened me up in a different way. And um the more I try to sort of like multitask too much, I mean, it just doesn't work. I have to really like allow myself space. That said, of course there are days where I am totally multitasking. It's just the reality of it. And um it's fun to have my kids in here. Not my son, actually. He's not really allowed in here. He's almost 2, and that's like terrible 2 is kind of crazy age. So he doesn't come in here much, but my daughter loves painting, loves drawing, and she will spend like hours just painting and drawing and not wanting me to even look. Like she has her own thing going, and I love
Cute.
doing that with her and being side by side. And the reality is it's just like it's never, so much as I would love to be one of those people that like my whole feed in my life is just like white walls with beautiful artwork and like really curated spaces. Like that's not the reality of my life at all, ever. It's like always a mess. It's always a little bit chaotic. The kids are always here and like in and out. Like that's just true. And like I can't really separate, to act like I'm like a mother here and then an artist, like, and to keep it totally separate is not authentic and also just like not doable. So, and I think it's allowed me to, like have more work-life balance just by accepting that, just saying like, this is true to me. And the more I try to like keep it all separate and neat and tidy, like it just doesn't work. And so it kind of has to be like all a mishmash. And
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, I think that's what makes it more powerful too, though, for like the viewer or for maybe your audience or your customers to feel like they know you. Because if everything was curated and all perfect and white, it's like, this can't be like, that's just not reality of anyone's life. Like, it's like an airbrushed model
Yeah.
versus like what
Yeah.
real life, like it's just not how
Yeah.
they are. So I really think, especially these days, just the more kind of real we can be is really inspiring. So I appreciate that you carry that into the message you share with the world and your art and everything. Yeah, you're doing a good
Thank
job.
thank you. Yeah, I feel like too with social media. I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I'm like, I've never been someone that has just been like, this is a business. I'm just going to be strategic, treat it like a business. Like for me, like the actual like interpersonal connection of it all, like keeps it interesting and keeps it like worthwhile for me. I think like I never really felt like I could be someone that just sort of had the strategy and put out like the marketing, the branding, and because it like my art is an extension of me and myself and my life, and it just doesn't feel authentic to me and my art to keep it so separate and curated and strategic. And, like it is like raw, touchy feely, emotional, all over the place. Like that's the truth. So
Yeah, totally. Do you feel like the way that you share, like even if you are still kind of like since starting full time 2018 like on Instagram, do you feel like the way that you share has changed? Because I feel like I've been going through this a lot where I used to like write these paragraphs about how I felt and like share them with my art. And it was
yeah.
more, and it was also during a time when I was going through a lot of stuff. Like I was a young 20 in my early 20s to mid 20s and just like had all this angst and was like a little bit less stable in a way than I am now. I almost feel like my life's more boring now and there's not as much passion. I mean, I have passion, but like there's just not as much chaos to like post on the
Yeah.
internet. I'm wondering for you, because you've also grown up and gone through a phase of your life with this, do you feel like your message has changed since then?
Well, I feel like I feel like the whole landscape of social media has changed,
Yeah.
and it it feels like there's more pressure to be delivering content, whereas of course like when we started it was just like posting daily instant photos and your feelings. Like I would like sort of like I'm still pretty like hard on my sleeve, but I feel like these days the focus has to be so much more on like creating an interesting content that someone will actually like watch and engage in long enough that like um I'm usually exhausted by that point to then actually like write an authentic real caption. And then
Right.
sometimes I do, and no one sees it and or seems to read it. So I think that for me it's like partly that, and then more, yeah, I think like more overthinking it, even though in a lot of ways in my life, like I'm much more relaxed and able to just be more authentically myself. I think it was like less serious back then, right? Like I don't know what it is about now. It just feels like it has to be so much, it's so much more. And it like just posting one. I mean, that was back in the days when people just post their meal, right?
Yeah.
It was like I feel like we would just post like the color palette that you were working on and just like say how you felt. And like just yeah, it was just like it was simple, it was real, it was raw. I do miss those days. I think I'm still like that, like in Instagram stories here and there, but yeah, I do think it's changed for multiple reasons. And I'm not sure. I feel like there's also so much more like strategy, and this is what people actually want to hear and see. And we've become so much more disconnected with our audiences and communities. Like it's hard to know how to approach it. I feel like I'm constantly in that questioning. I don't know about you, but I'm constantly like, okay, I'm just gonna do this and keep posting this, and like I don't know if it's even reaching anyone anymore, or if anyone wants to see. I should just kind of keep like doing my thing, and then I come back to like how great it is as a tool and a connector and meeting people. And like I never would have known you or your work
Yeah,
or other people. So I feel like I'm constantly, I don't know about you, but I go back and forth on that all the time. And
absolutely.
like I also feel like I am just grateful that we have it though, because when I started, it was, I mean, I was looking through my old files of these like portfolios I would print out, and I would literally like walk into a shop or a gallery or student and be like, hi, I'm Laura, here's my art. Like that was it. Like there was no like other way.
Right.
It was very much like having this like essentially free platform to put yourself out there to connect with people in such a real authentic way. I don't take that for granted. I think we were very lucky this era that we even have that, because that was not a thing, especially like when I graduated with my art degree. It was just like what do you do?
Yeah.
So to be able to put yourself out there in that way, it's like, and that artists can grow so quickly just by like a viral reel or something is pretty incredible time. It has its challenges also, but I think
I think all of that makes sense. And it does seem like these days it's more hit or miss, but it is still a great connector. And I feel like, yeah, I feel like I go through my cycles with it where I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And then I'm like, no, I actually don't know what I'm doing on here anymore. And like, I just need a week off. So it's definitely like that.
Same.
But I think it is, yeah, it's a good way to connect. Have you found any other, like, because I'm assuming now you're kind of at a point where it's really helpful in the beginning to get footing and stuff as like a new artist, but are you at a point now where you're not having to, like, where projects come in and there's more of just like a steady flow of business?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say yes and no. Like it constantly ebbs and flows. Like I've had times where I have felt like more is coming in than I can handle and it's a little bit overwhelming, but great. And then times where, even recent times where it feels like total crickets. And I think the again, the acceptance of like the real ebb and sorry, my dog is running around barking. Um, there are just such huge peaks and valleys to this, and I think just the longer you do it, it's more just like you realize that's just part of it. It's going to have slower times, it's going to have busier times, and to sort of not freak out in between. And nowadays I think, I do feel like I have this pressure. I need to keep like growing my audience because for the kind of work that I do, I don't have tons of repeat customers. It's not like I have a product, that people buy over and over again, and maybe people buy one big piece and then that's like all they'll ever purchase. Maybe they're still a fan and they're still following, but I do feel like for that, I do feel a little bit like the pressure I need to keep like posting, keep putting myself out there in hopes of like reaching new people. But at the same time, like at this point, like I do feel like every project always leads to another project, like even off the internet, people are seeing things in person and that is a way, and there's enough of a steady flow that I feel like I can sort of just trust that as long as I keep doing the work, it will keep coming through and keep coming up, and saying yes to the right projects, then more of those projects will come through. And
Yeah.
so a little bit of both, but yeah, definitely not as much as, like sometimes this is weird to say, but like when you're not as busy, you don't have as many projects coming through. I don't know if you feel this way. It's like, if only you could go back and tell that version of yourself, like
Enjoy
to
it.
enjoy it, to savor and enjoy this time, because like some of the best work is created in that time where actually no one wants or needs anything from you. You know what
Totally.
I mean? Like no one's asking anything of you and you're creating purely from just like that drive and that excitement to create with zero pressure on it is like a feeling that I wish I could like capture and recreate for myself now, because it's kind of, I think the best work kind of comes out of that time, and then that turns into like the next thing and how you like then gain some momentum. But it's hard to get that back. I don't know if you feel that way, but like I feel like now most of the time I'm creating specifically for people who want something specific, and then when I'm creating new work I have so much more pressure on it for myself, like it's very hard to get back that feeling of like when no one cared at all and no one was, and it was just like I could just throw something out there, and if one person saw it and said they liked it, that was success, that was so exciting.
Yeah.
And I think the longer you do it, you sort of lose that and forget that, like how to constantly remind myself, like nowadays I'm disappointed in myself if I'm not selling out a whole collection. And I'm like, that's crazy. It was, wasn't that long ago that like I would put collections up month after month after month. And when one sold like 7 months in, I was just like so elated, that was such a different time. And so
Right. Well, I find it's like it's almost hard to one up yourself. Like once you hit the bar this high, then that's your expectation or better.
yeah.
I don't know if you feel that, but as an artist,
And then you're disappointed like that
yeah.
you
And then I'm
didn't
like,
do that
wait,
again.
people don't like me anymore. It's like, no, that's not the reality. But like some things do just do better than others, or the right person at the right
Yeah,
time sees it. So it is a total ebb and flow. And yeah, I always just try to remind myself during the slower times, to like maybe take an afternoon off, like because there'll be a time when I don't get to do that because I have like deadlines, and that always comes back around. So not burning myself off, but not burning myself out in the slow times so that I can like work hard during the busy times too.
totally. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like sometimes the slow times, the burnout is totally like mental
Yes,
too,
absolutely.
like
Worry.
it's slow. Yeah, like the
Yeah.
worry, the self-doubt, and then you burn yourself out on just like spinning your wheels of like whatever's happening, are you ever going to be able to do this again? And then like it does come back around and then you're busy and you're like, man, had I taken that slower time to like decompress, do some different things, make some work just for myself, go on an adventure, like I'd be in such a better place now. But such is the cycle, life is cycle of an artist. And I don't
Mhm.
know. On one hand, I think if we had the ability to completely like cut that off and not feel emotional about our work, like we wouldn't be making the work we're making. So
That's
I don't
true.
know. I feel like it's like a catch 22, you know, like I feel like um my husband is so like even keeled. And sometimes I really envy that because I feel like I'm just like a freaking roller coaster of like I'm just like I'm up, I'm down, I feel everything so deeply. And it's like so it's exhausting, but it's also like and so raw. And I feel like I can create from that place. But I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to just sort of be that mellow, even keel person.
Right.
But I know that I would lose some of like how I create that way too. So
Sure. Well, and that's what makes you guys a good match.
yeah, yes, definitely complimentary.
Yeah.
It would be a disaster if he was as emotional as
It
I
would be
am.
like, this is too much. I'm emotionally burned
Yeah.
out. Yeah. You hear right now people talking about how hard the world is. It's, it's a hard time to be alive after COVID. We have this environmental crisis. There's a lot of stuff to be worried about if you look at the news. But I find that often like artists and creatives have more hope than others because we are connected to like our purpose in our life, as far as creating. But what's giving you hope about the future and the world right now?
That's a hard one. I think it's that, and then also the ability to sort of escape in what we're doing. And I feel like then I have a lot of guilt about that because I'm like I do sometimes feel like I'm so focused on sort of like what is essentially fluff, you know, like extra, just like art. But then I remember that like we do need like that the optimism, we need the hope, we need people focusing on just the good, just the beauty, you know, that and that's like where I feel my calling is. So I think like whatever it is at any given point, I feel like even if I'm personally going through something, the world's going through something, I feel like my purpose and my work is to focus on the beauty and focus on the light always in the darkness and in whatever's going on. And that's kind of what keeps me going. And I don't know if I would say that it totally gives me hope on like what's happening in the world, um but I think I can see that in every aspect of life. Like I'm definitely someone that like is going to look at the silver lining, look at the more hopeful side, look at the good, and just like honestly hope that that outweighs the bad and that we keep like moving forward and like on every little thing just, you know, a little bit step in a better direction, you know, keeping it keeping it moving. But yeah, I think it can get overwhelming, and I don't know if like that's a really definitive answer or anything. It's just that I I try to focus on the good and focus on the beauty and focus on the light. And I feel like that that alone will have a ripple effect, you know, and more of us that can do that. And that's how I know I show up best in the world. So and hopefully that will, you know, affect something. But yeah, you know, it's scary. It's scary out there having kids growing up in this
Yeah.
this world, wondering what it's gonna be like. But um you know, I think that that's always the reality to some extent, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the more we can focus on the hope and the joy and like remind others to do so is really important because there's a lot of negativity. And so that's just that's no way to live in your mind all the time, just being like worried about what's going to happen or what could happen. So I appreciate that answer. I was curious about if you could just talk briefly about the trade program you do on your website. Just going back into business a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been like looking at just art, like have you found that a good way to connect with designers and art consultants? And did that kind of idea
Yeah.
spur from your interior design degree, or how did that
Yeah.
come about?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I did interior design after interior design degree after my art degree. Again, it was sort of like a more marketable skill and wanting to do something different. And I did some design, but always kind of came back to the art. But I love working with designers and have worked with both clients directly and designers over the years. And I honestly never for a long time did any kind of to the trade discount. I just felt like, on it, to be totally honest, I was pricing myself too low. So the idea of like then giving any sort of discount to anyone on top of that was like really like I quite honestly couldn't afford to do it, like it just that was the reality. So I just kind of was like, and things were coming through enough directly. But I think I kind of had to like come out of that and go big picture and price myself in a way that I could actually afford to do this, and um realize how great anytime I've worked with a designer has been, and that designers are a great like way to connect with clients, and designers themselves can be repeat customers for you as an artist. Whereas direct clients, like I said, like are probably not going to continue purchasing pieces from you forever, right? But a designer is going to have multiple clients, and if they like working with you and they like your work, and you're also able to give them an advantage, then they'll keep coming back to you. And that's ultimately what I came to, and it's been great. And I think I wish I would have done it sooner, because I think there's so much value in that. And I had plenty of designers that did come back, but I think I think it all came back to this like scarcity and sort of like lack mentality, that I was always so afraid that I was not going to be able to afford to keep doing this and keep working. And so I like didn't quite price myself high enough because I was so afraid of rejection. And it was like this whole thing. And now I'm able to sort of step back and see big picture, realize I need to be pricing myself high enough that I can actually afford to do this, like, and do it well and spend the time I need to spend on something. Because when you price something lower, you want to get it done, because the longer you spend on it, the less you actually make, right? And then materials and X, Y, and Z. And then also so that there's some room for overhead for working with designers. Galleries is like a whole other thing that I don't do much of, but that's like they take quite a cut. Like everyone's taking a cut, and I think I had a hard time with that when I was younger and just hustling so hard. I was like, I can't afford for someone else to take a cut, and just then trusting that like people could be paying bigger prices, right, for things. But I think so the To the Trade program has been like, when I release collections, I like release them to designers first. That came out of like a couple of designers were like trying to snag pieces, and I was and then having to like do that quick, like, okay, like before it goes out. And I was like, I don't want you to have to work that way, especially when someone's like purchasing fine art. It shouldn't, as much as it's great for my ego when things sell quickly, I kind of had to step back and be like, that's not the way I want people buying art for their home, or either. Like it's you want to be able to really like feel into it. It's an investment for for life and for your space. So giving them like sort of this like first look for like up to a week to kind of like decide with their clients and stuff, and then I give them like a discount so that they're able to like then sell it to their clients. And I think it's a good thing to do, just for like, so many interior designers purchase art through galleries or through people that are curating the art for them already, and they're sort of often afraid to work with artists directly. So the more that you can make that direct connection, I think, and make it worth their while, because they're doing work on their end to like get these pieces in their client's home, right? So that's where it came from. And I have a few designers here in Seattle that I love working with and have done many things with, but I think that that's like such it should be more of a marriage of artists and designers working together. And
Right.
I think sometimes it's like really separate.
Yeah, like there doesn't need to be that gallery in the middle necessarily. Because then that's
Yes.
taking more cut from the artist. So it's cool if you, because I just never seen a program like that before. And I was like, that's really interesting concept.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish that I would have done it sooner. And I recommend it to like other artists, and think like, if you can, because ultimately like our work is going in interiors
Mm-hmm.
spaces, right? And like the more you can connect with people that are already designing spaces and being thoughtful. And then I also feel like, I don't know if you feel this way, I don't have, like, you have great photography always. I've never like had a decent camera. I always have like, I have photographer friends that I work with sometimes and try to hire, but I don't haven't always done that. And one of my biggest regrets of like having 6 years of like creating, selling, and putting work out the door is like lack of documentation.
Do you
Like,
have like the high res scans of the paintings
no,
or images? Okay, so you can't go make a print of something if you, because
I
you might
have,
have like,
yeah, I have like a good amount that I have high res photos of, but I have years of collections of work that, especially during that pandemic time when things were selling really quickly, where I was like doing a collection every month and just like snapping photos of it with my iPhone in my house and then like selling it and shipping it. And there was no like pause for documentation. And I'm kicking myself. And like one thing that design, like working with designers too, is like they're usually going to get a project documented. And then it's going to be in like a really beautiful space that is designed, like curated, all of that. So that's like another way that I actually tell, like, have a lot of designers I work with that like, feel free to reach out to me if you need art for your space, like even just for the photo shoot. Because if I could get a photo of this piece in a beautiful space, that's like gold to me.
mm-hmm. There
Because
are apps
often,
out there too, if you like have the high res photo, it doesn't necessarily look as real, but like where you can put the photo, you
oh,
probably
the app, yeah.
the apps where you like put a
Yeah.
high res photo of your art into it, and then you can like even add frames and stuff.
Yes, I just did start using those. I feel like I resisted for a long time, but like most people can't tell the difference. Like I
Yeah,
can and you can,
right.
but I was like, yeah, people really can't tell the difference. But um yeah, and that's an amazing new tool, I think, for sure. But I also think having like it in a real space is,
Yeah.
there's just something to that. And
Well, that's
that's
interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that because I don't really have, I definitely have like high res images of most all of my art, but I don't have photos of it like in, and I have a photo like with me of most of it, but like I
right
don't have photos in a space of
in a
most.
space. Yeah.
I don't have a
Which is,
space like that. Like
yeah, I know exactly. And so that's
sometimes,
why I mean the apps are great, that new thing, but that's exactly it. It's like to see the work in context, like the have like high res photos of the work in context, especially if it's a designer has created the space. I don't know if you like ask some, I always ask for people to send me photos after they take a piece home.
mm,
Like, I'd love to see it in your space, but like most of the time it's not going to be a very
good
high
photo.
quality
Yeah.
photo, or the space is
Angles.
not going to be like how you would, yeah. So and a lot of designers like finish a space and maybe the clients ran out of budget for art or to really put stuff, and they'll like actually go and just get stuff at like, sometimes, what's that, like Home Goods or something, to just add to the space just for the photo shoot.
Mhm.
Like, because like I said, I worked as a designer for designers
Right.
for many years, and that was like a really big part of it. It was always like this, the art layer was just like throw it in at the end sometimes if it's not like budgeted in, and which is a waste for everyone kind of. But so I do offer, like when I have them, like even lending out a piece of art for that kind of scenario, because if they can like give me a photo,
Yeah.
because and then you see it in that space, and it's sometimes like people, it's hard for them to picture, like buyers and collectors, it's hard for them to picture a piece in their own space. And I think the more that you can give them that context
Yeah.
and show them, like, I think it comes back to like the knowing the artist, knowing the story, or but also like the lifestyle that like you're sort of creating like around your work
Well, it's,
is,
it's product education too, is what like it's just
yeah,
like,
totally.
and it
Yeah.
should maybe be like, I think that's been part of the way I'm transitioning in my business too, is like I would like to go more that fine art route of like curate
Yeah.
in nice spaces. It's not like, because that's like what I'm, the reality of how I'm having to price my art too, to like afford to keep doing what I'm doing. So it's like, if it's going to
Mm.
go in a nice, like if it's going to be that price, it's going to go in a nice space. So what does that look like? So I think that's really
Yeah.
good points, and definitely something I'll take home and think about more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly it. I think it's like, and like I don't have like a nice, beautiful home. I'm not someone that's collecting and buying art. I'm someone that's creating art, right? So like the photos in my home are not gonna do it justice in that way. And so I think like that's where working with designers can be like really key in connecting in that way. And I think like the just like putting it in the kind of space, like you said, that you imagine it going in, it's
Mhm.
good for everybody. And just being having those designers that maybe like vibe with your aesthetic, then they're going to design in a similar way for all kinds of clients, and your work might fit into like many projects that they do in the
Mhm.
future, so I think the more you can find and connect with ones that are like and it's, I think, a combination of like hitting the streets and just reaching out and cold emailing, but also like for me, I was like, I had a few that have worked with me and purchased pieces. And so I was like, hey, like, how can we work together more? I know that you already like my work and I like your work. Let's do this together. And I think that's been like a great partnership. And one, like I said, I wish I would have kind of like seen big picture of earlier and
Yeah.
gotten going earlier.
No, that's really cool. I think keep at that, and I think it's not necessarily about, yeah, like quantity, but more about the quality of the relationship and like how often they repeat. Because you could have a designer that's just like working with you and one other artist, and you're like their chosen artist, and then you don't need to have 12 designers that want to work with you. You only need a couple. So like that would be
Yeah,
ideal.
totally. And yeah, and like I said, especially in Seattle, just like for you and other people are like us, like there are a couple people that are like, a lot of designers just work directly with a couple people that are sort of like a gallery for all intents and purposes for a certain amount of curated artists, and then they're only ever showing those designers like these artists work. And I think that's a middleman that you don't necessarily need,
Mhm.
right? Like a gallery, and if you can connect with them directly.
Mhm.
But because of those setups and situations, I do think some designers feel like they can't directly reach out to an artist, which is crazy. As an artist, I'm sure you feel this way too. I'm like, oh my God, like whenever a designer reaches out to me, I'm like, amazing.
Yeah,
But there are these like weird things that make it feel like there's a barrier of entry, and like that's not the route they should go.
there's so many barriers of entry in the art world. Well, and I think too, maybe a reason they don't reach out to an artist is I feel like there is this just like preconceived notion of artists that like they don't have their shit together, that we don't have our stuff, like, and like we don't have, and I think it's just changed a
And we're
lot.
just like
Yeah,
painting and have no idea what's going on.
like no idea even how to like send an invoice, which just like is not the reality. And I feel like especially with all the artists now that are like full-time doing it and like businesses, it's like artists used to only be making money when they were dead off their work, and
Yeah.
now like contemporary art's grown a lot, and so maybe it is just part of like that old system too.
Like I don't want to bash a certain way of doing things or anything, but I do think like for both like a client and a collector and a buyer, like you're investing in a piece, and do you want 50% of that investment to go to a gallery or someone that's just holding the art for another artist? Or like, do you want to, if you're going to invest that much in a piece, do you want to actually support the artist? And I think that's like the reality of the middleman situation, is like when you're buying from someplace like that. So I think connecting directly with artists and having like designers and artists work directly, it's like that's totally a really important and viable way to support the arts and support artists and allow us to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you so much for all your thoughts today and everything. It was great to like hear your story and meet you. And hopefully we can connect again in the future. It'd be
Yeah, totally. It was great to connect. I feel like we could probably talk for hours about all the things. So
good.
we'll have to connect sometime in real
Absolutely.
life over coffee or Zoom again. But yeah, I appreciate you thinking of me. And yeah, it's been fun to watch your career and journey as well. So we'll definitely have to keep in touch.
Okay, will do. All right, Laura, thank you so much for your time. I'll talk to you
Thank
later.
you. Have a good one. Bye.